good evening, and thank you very much for joining me once again for this week's edition of Not a Collection of Parts. This week I'm going to be talking about a group of tissues that they're fairly well documented and talked about, and I've talked about them before in various sort of guises, but this week it's a set of structures known as the erector spinae muscles. And these are the muscles, essentially, the reason that we're sort of sitting here, and I'm sitting here, or whatever you're doing, I don't know, is because of these spinal muscles. So these are the muscles that travel either side of the spine, and they sort of form V's. And so we're going to have a look at this. And we're going to also have a little bit look at some research in relation to the muscles switching on and switching off, which is kind of interesting. So, you know, without further ado, let's crack on and have a little look at this week's Not a Collection of Parts. So before we get going, let me press the right buttons. There we go. Not a collection of parts. Thank you very much. Before we get fully engaged, as it were, please just a little reminder that on the erector spinae, please do consider supporting me on Patreon. It is incredibly helpful if you do, and I will love you. I love you forever. I mean, you know, I say love you forever. It's a little bit like the Asda, the supermarket Asda, and they say, if you don't love me, you get your money back. And I often think it's a big ask, isn't it? You know, you've got a bit of toilet duck or something, and you know, if you don't love your toilet, I'm not sure if I'm ever going to love a toilet duck. But anyway, call me old-fashioned. Nothing against toilet ducks. Anyway, so where are we? So the erector spinae muscles consist of a grouping of tissues that you can refer to as not that button, as the ILS muscles. They're the I love whatever S you want. So they're the thoracolumbar fascia, the iliocostalis. These are the things we're going to cover. The iliocostalis, the longissimus, and spinalis are the muscles that make up the grouping that we refer to as the erector spinae. So ILS, and that's what those for. So, you know, sewing, sushi, sailing, sex, you name it. But we're also going to have a quick look at the abdominal continuity and how this goes up into the neck, not the abdominal stuff, but the muscles. And we just look at the idea of stability on the edge of stiffness. Now, I have talked about the thoracolumbar fascia before. It's already in the series, so have a little look at that. It's a very, very interesting bit of kit, and you know, but we are going to quickly cover it because it's the stuff that sits around these erector spinae muscles. And so hopefully this is the you know, sort of putting jigsaw pieces together, and then we can sort of build. That's a good idea, actually. Build the body out from that central point. Maybe that's not a bad idea as well. Please let me know what you want me to talk about, because I'll just talk about any old crap otherwise. But I sometimes wonder whether I'm doing this as much more for me than anybody else. So this is the support act, and this is what I mentioned before, is this idea of the thoracolumbar fascia, this really strong, thickened bit of tissue that sits around that lumbar spine. And encases these remarkable spine and the abdomen, and it stretches around. It goes up into the diaphragm, and have a little look, as I said at the previous episode, that talks about that. And sort of here it is. This is the tissue that you can look at here. So this is the lower back, and you can see the latissimus dorsi spreading itself down into it, sort of blending into it. And it doesn't stop there, that latissimus dorsi. It blends in a way that we refer to as decussation. So decussating means it doesn't follow a specific pathway. It blends in a mishmash to create an incredible strength. So you couldn't pull this muscle apart from this connection. This is absolutely solid, and this is the bit that we refer to as the thoracolumbar fascia. And then the casing of this tissue, this sort of surrounding tissue, carries on all the way up. And so underneath this tissue that you'd see here, sitting underneath, and go back to the previous slide here, sort of sitting underneath this bit here, is going to be, you can see it sort of poking through here, so trapezius up at the top. There's our trapezius, and you can see this sort of thoracolumbar fascia, this tissue sitting around. So this follows all the way up and creates a kind of a wrapping, a casing, like a bit of a sausage skin that's sitting all the way around this. And then when we peel those muscles back, then you get to that bit that we can sort of say is the covering of the erector spinae muscles. And then sort of further up in here is the remainder of it. So the idea of individual muscle structures in there is a bit worrying, but you know, there it is. That's what the anatomy of it is. This is what it looks like in a very, very clean dissection. Very skillful dissection. Would take days, if not weeks, to get to this point. You know, lots of what's the word? Hairspray to keep it intact, and glue and stuff, and lifting things up and putting things down. It's very, very sanitized and tidy, and you can just see underneath, sort of peeking out underneath these tissues, you can sort of see these muscles, the erector spinae. In this instance, this thoracolumbar fascia is quite thin, but you can get the idea really clearly as to how latissimus dorsi and the breadth of latissimus dorsi is blending into it, not just on this lower portion, but all the way through it. So then you've got the medial border of the scapula, the rhomboids and the deltoids, and you can sort of see here that the erector spinae structures are going deeper. They're sort of channeling inwards, if you like. So here is our thoracolumbar fascia. This is our posterior layer, these different directions of the posterior layer. So this is going to be your spinous process. This is the front part of the spine. You've got psoas major. This is QL, quadratus lumborum here. And you can just see that relationship of latissimus dorsi. And so these are what you would say is the rectus spinae and transverso spinalis. So these are really, really deep tissues that are sitting in there. It's interesting here that they're not being portrayed as sort of individual structures, but sort of rather, you know, one layer. And psoas is going down here. So you got the transverse abdominis and the internal oblique here, and then the external external abdominal oblique in here, quadratus lumborum, and the middle layer, if you like, of the thoracolumbar fascia. So you can see here that the thoracolumbar fascia wraps itself around. It's blending through the transverse process of the spine here, and it's blending around. It's got another layer here, and this is the attachment site of psoas major. So the moment we go into any kind of lumbar spine or any kind of you know, back anatomy, we end up with this join up, these sort of circles of tissues that are held in place. And that's really the point, is that you've got this enormous amount of stability that has to be held in place as far as the lower back is concerned. A name for it here would be the lumbar aponeurosis. Great dissection picture again here from here, latissimus dorsi. You can see a slightly different arrangement. If we go back to the, where are we? You see this slightly different arrangement here. So this is the lumbar aponeurosis, and then you've got this latissimus dorsi blending down here. See how it's different from one side to the other? Massively trimmed. I mean, you know, you don't peel the tissue back and it's there. And then if we go back to this one, here we go. It's a slightly different arrangement into here. So, you know, the muscle reaches across. You've got little pockets in here where the nerve is going to come out and pull out through there. So I've got a little bit of a video to show you, and hopefully we'll be able to get the sound on here as well. Multi-layer of the fascia, yeah, and it becomes blended into external oblique on the outside, blended in through the inside of the, well, it's going to become the posterior fascia of QL, and then stitched firmly against the spine with the erector spinae muscles inside it. What's the filling for my wrap? My quesadilla. The filling for my wrap is erector spinae on its first layer. So it's Miss Dawson. Could be a cameraman, eh? No, it would never. So there, see that pull? If I just pull this way from here, if I pull this way, that's up against the spine. Yeah, pull this way, that's up against the spine. Like the whole body moves, and I pull on it. When I come on this way, and I pull it this way, external oblique, latissimus dorsi will come across it from here, and then it's attached to the spine and coming across this way. Erector spinae held in place. We've still got a layer because we bisected it. Cool. Press that button, thank you. Flapped all the way up and blended into this, and I've cut that away. And from the upper portion, thoracolumbar fascia starts up in the top, very thin. If you think about it, that would make sense, because you want lots of
flexibility and movement up in here, so you don't want a big thick band of connective tissue holding you in place. And as it comes down, as it starts to come down, we see the fibers of that blending through and across, and lots of crossing over. And this thoracolumbar fascia is going to head to the spinous process, and it's going to blend into the fibers of the interspinous ligament, the sort of the tissues that form the ligament that's inside the spinous process. So I'm just going to run my scalpel down here and open this bag up a little bit and see what's inside it. And you can see that it's quite a strong bag. And as I go down, I'm finding there's resistance, and it's just getting thicker as I go down it. So I'm trying not to go too deep, because I don't want to end up opening up the muscle bag too much. But I'm going to keep going all the way, including down into the sacrum and the coccyx area. And again, as I go down, it's getting stronger, thicker. And its strength is coming not just necessarily from its thickness, that's about as thick as it's going to get, but from the number of fibers that are going to enter into it. That's the point, is that, you can have 1,000 fibers or 1,000,000 fibers, put 1,000,000 fibers through something in lots of different directions, it's going to be stronger. Try and bash your way through an impenetrable jungle, and what are you meeting? You're just meeting lots of fibrous bits of material as you go through it. So we're going to keep going. This is down sort of sacral area here. And
just sort of speeding that up a little bit, just to sort of get to the end point there. That section is quite a sort of a time-consuming process if you can do it carefully. And look at the fibers. Look at those fibers. As I'm peeling that back, look at the density of the fibers.
Glute stabilizing on the outside. These erector spinae muscles stabilizing down the inside and the center of the line of the back. And then we start to see the muscle here. So, so the idea of just erector spinae muscles being part of our sort of stopper group is probably not going to cut it for anymore. We have to rethink that. So here's our thoracolumbar fascia coming out, and we hit that, what we call that raphe again. So what's that raphe? That's that lining of external oblique. We got a bit of, and its inside edge there. We got transversalis. We got internal oblique coming up to join this really strong band, and then latissimus dorsi coming down to hit it as well.
That's the point about this, is that although we've looked at that surface area of these tissues, is that you're also getting the fact that it's hard to explain, but latissimus dorsi is going not just over the surface, like you're saying in what is essentially a one-dimensional picture, but it's traveling underneath it and through it, and the muscles are coming back as well. It's very hard and confusing to be able to separate things out. This is just a picture here that, again, some of you might have seen this before, that just showing you that continuity as it runs itself down the back. So we've got our headliner, and our headliner, of course, is the erector spinae. So we've given you the warm-up app, the support act, if you like, and so now onto our headliner. And the thing about the upper part of the body, I've mentioned this before, is the fact that we have this ability to stand upright. It's the extension that we have as humans that has sort of allowed us to climb up the food chain. And you can look at these neck muscles up in here, and again covering this in the section I've talked about the deep neck and whiplash. And we understand that these tissues into here, this bone, the length of this bone in here is very different than the humans. And so again, the requirement is for much more strength to be put in place. If we're going to walk around with on our knuckles, it'd be a gorilla, eh? My word. So here's our grouping. Here's our ILS, our iliocostalis, longissimus, spinalis, and sacrospinalis. You can sort of see them broken down. Iliocostalis, so these are iliocostalis lumborum, iliocostalis lumborum, longissimus lumborum, spinalis, sacrospinalis. Yeah, carrying on. So this is another group. So longissimus thoracis, iliocostalis lumborum, sacrospinalis is all these tissues covering down. Now the superficial tissues of the erector spinae form V's, and so they go from either the spinous process or the transverse process of the spine out to either the transverse process or the ribs, and so that's why you have things referred to as the costalis. So those are the grouping, they go out, and then the deeper muscles, which we're not going to talk about today, the deeper muscles form A's, and these are the deeper muscles that go adjacent to the spine. These are paraspinal groupings of muscles. So we look at that, there's the structures here, the image that we can see, and we've got the posterior, what's referred to as the posterior lumbodorsal fascia, which is also going to give you the, you know, by any other name, is going to be thoracolumbar fascia as well. Multifidus, and there's your deeper muscles into here, longissimus, iliocostalis. And you can sort of see they have lots of differentiated directions because there's lots of movement. It's not just a case of flexion, extension, it's a case of rotation, and some of the deeper muscles are working on the opposite side. So when they're working on this side, they're working on this side to allow the opposite side to function, and vice versa. And so that's what you end up with when you're dealing with these tissues. But again, look at the circular nature of this. This is going to become important when we look at, you know, what happens in that erector spinae when it switches itself off, which is kind of cool. But look at the circular nature of it, and you know, this is the core. I don't like the word core. I think it's just a stupid idea. I mean, there's no such thing. You can have a core that is more than one thing or else. Oh, no, it's just it's just not a sensible idea. Quite harmful, if anything. Here's another one. This is a picture from Gray's. So again, you've got this lumbodorsal fascia or thoracolumbar fascia, depending on what you want to talk about it. So they're showing you there's an anterior layer and a posterior layer, and then there's a sort of a further anterior layer of the fascia that then wraps itself through and around QL. Different structure, but again, the rest of it isn't demonstrated here. This is the outlier. This is the outlier of this tissue. Yeah, so again, you see how far all that goes up? Look at the distance that it's traveling up from the spinal, spinous process, from the lumbar spine area, all the way up. And the last one ends up on the back of the head. Yeah, another. Just zooming into it a little bit. Yeah, so these are all sort of the Gray's pictures. And then finally, we have spinalis capitis, so we have spinalis and semispinalis capitis and longissimus capitis all the way up into those tissues. Yeah. So they're pretty hard to separate out in terms of labeling them, like we're saying there. To label those tissues is a journey, if you like, of hope rather than accuracy, because they don't look like that. When you sort of pull them apart, you can create the shapes and spaces, but they don't function like that. They don't look like that, and they're not supposed to be separated, because we go back to a few slides ago, we looked at that wrapping that was around them, and that's the stuff that holds it in place. So they are designed to operate within the confines of a unit. Take the unit apart or break the unit apart, it's not going to work. It doesn't work like that. And so this anatomy that you're saying is this collection of parts. And so there's exactly what I mean. There's a picture of it. If we take this, there's our erector spinae structures. There's the left arm, and this is you can see the unit, if you like. So we've got the skin, superficial fascia, we've got the spinous process coming down through the center, and you can see how even when the surrounding tissues have been taken away, they still kind of function as a main unit. So here's an interesting phenomena that what's been found is this thing called a flexion relaxation phenomenon. It's quite a hard word to say, phenomenon. And what that is that when you're testing for something, the flexion relaxation phenomena is when somebody goes into full flexion, a full forward bend. What happens is the electrical activity of the spinal muscles drops out. It just disappears. Yeah. And nobody's really sure why. We're not exactly sure what's going on here, but it happens all the way up. The erector spinae and the neck muscles can be tested slightly differently. So this is what I mean by the forward flexion aspect. So there we go. There's our flexion first phase, second phase, and full flexion phase. And at some point, these muscles appear to sort of switch off, and you can see it here. This is what's happening. They just there's the measurement, and boom, they just switched off when somebody's in full flexion. So what is then holding the body up? And we're not really quite sure. And we know that the lumbar muscles in the lower back have lower tone or lower, something else goes on in there as far as that full flexion is concerned, but we don't know what, or rather the science doesn't know what. Now we can speculate, but what you'd have to then do is what people are thinking of is that some of the deeper structures that are more down into, say, anteriorly, more perhaps psoas, perhaps QL, perhaps some of the ligamental structures, or perhaps some of the tissues that wrap around the spine, the tissues that we refer to as the core or the abdomen, are involved in making sure that something is not making us fall forwards. Because if you imagine that position that we're in, there's that position there, you imagine this position in here, well, why aren't we falling over? So there's got to be some kind of recruitment that happens within those tissues if this is normal, if we have a normal activity going on. Which brings us to our next bit of interesting bit of kit, because this is a study that I found, where is it? It's an old study, but it's 1995. It's still relative. Not much is going to change. It's a few things have been done. There's a few other studies out there in relation to this phenomena. But what they did, and what I was interested in, was they compared the study between people with lower back pain, what was referred to as chronic lower back pain, and people that were sort of normal. Now, it's a tricky one because everybody, or most people at some stage, have back pain. We all, I think it's been estimated that 95% of the population, by the time they get to into their 50s or 60s, will have had some episodes in relation to chronic back pain. And there's that thing of, well, why? Well, is it injury and goodness knows what else. But this is the study that they did. It wasn't a massive group, but this is the abstract. So we'll have a quick look at the abstract, and I'm not going to pull you out, spend a lot of time. It wasn't a massive group. There were only 25 healthy subjects, 13 males and 13 females. Average age was 28, so that's quite young. The 20 patients with chronic lower back pain, that's CLBP, the 12 males and 8 females, had an average age of 34. Now, I'm going to say that's young for people with chronic lower back pain, I'd want to know what else was going on. To have people that age with chronic lower back pain, which at 34 is relatively young, is there anything else? And so that's a question that we would ask. It doesn't really get answered, doesn't get answered to any degree at all in the paper, but that's not what they were testing. They were just saying, well, what's the comparison? That's the trouble that we have with anatomy and the studies that go with it, is that what are people looking for, and therefore what are you finding? In this instance, the comparison is interesting. I'll pull that out. I think I've done it a bit better than that as well, so let's go a little bit zoomed in on here. Let's have a little look. So electrical silence. So we know that we get this sort of switch off in full flexion. We know that the myoelectric signals, those pads that you saw stuck on somebody's back, we know that we get that. But at some point, what's going on. So this is the switch off of this muscle is normal. That's the normal thing that happens in full flexion. So that's what they're looking for. So they're looking to say that this is the normal thing. So electrical silence continued even after extending the trunk began. So no patients with chronic lower back pain demonstrated the flexion relaxation phenomena. Now that's really interesting. So people who were normally bending forwards, the flexion relaxation phenomena, they had a switch off. The myoelectric properties of that testing, inflection went, and so therefore it suggests recruitment of somewhere else. Maybe glute max, I don't know. But the people with lower back pain, it didn't switch off. So those muscles were still doing the job. The muscles were still switched on. A significant difference in muscular activities of rectus spinae between the groups was obtained when returning to the erect position for the maximum flexion, but it doesn't quite say what the difference is. Moreover, the time lag between trunk and hip movement was greater in patients than in healthy subjects. So again, the time lag in how the hip moved and the electrical input came back online was different than the people who were sort of healthy and normal. So it suggests to me that something else, and this is what I've always found, suspected, is that, you know, most people with back pain don't have full range of movement through their glutes. Not that they can't move their glutes or they can't switch their glutes on or off, just that there is not a full capacity through it, and there's ways that we can just get that working like a sort of accordion or a dimmer switch, as it were. So the study demonstrated that neuromuscular, so nerves and muscle coordination, neuromuscular coordination between the trunk and hip could be abnormal in patients with chronic lower back pain. You know, it's one of those, to me, it's one of those like no shit Sherlock type things, that this neuromuscular coordination between trunk and hip could be abnormal in patients with chronic lower back pain. You've got to test it and make the statement in order to be able to, even though it sounds like a case of like stating the bleeding obvious, you know, this shows that there is an issue there, and that's what this is all about. So you've got to test it. So there is some kind of differentiation of neuromuscular activity in the erector spinae muscles. We don't get the switch off. We don't get that flexion relaxation phenomena in those erector spinae muscles. To the best of my understanding, that is the same all the way up the back. This paper doesn't really go into that, but you know, so it's hard to say. But it's certainly an interesting phenomena nonetheless. So that's the erector spinae structures and the flexion relaxation phenomena, and I just wanted to sort of share that with you and show that to you. And there's loads more out there, of course. There's loads more to look at, and loads more to talk about. But essentially what we can think about, there was another one in there, I think. Oh, that's fine. Essentially what we can think about is the fact that something other than the back in lower back pain, in chronic lower back pain, and I think it's probably the same in any other back pain, something other than the lower back pain isn't working. There's no coordination between the two. So rather than it being, the takeaway from this, rather than it being that chronic lower back pain is necessarily a disc or another involvement, that there is some kind of neuromuscular coordination. When one is supposed to be taking part of the other, it's not doing it. So the muscles are switched on all the time in the lower back, and because presumably they can't rely on the rest of the gang to do the job that they're supposed to do. I don't know. So there we go. That's that's the erector spinae and flexion relaxation phenomenon, which was kind of a new one on me. I'd sort of heard of it, but I hadn't really investigated it. So I found that really interesting and really useful, and because it just allows you to look into a slightly different area, like a slightly different place for you know, considering what you're looking at when people are walking in with back pain. So that's it for this episode. Please do let me know anything you want me to look at. I'm more than happy to talk about anything you like. If you want a Q&A session, do let me know. Please also do consider looking after or helping me out by supporting me on Patreon. It's really just a few pennies a month. I sound like somebody saying panhandling for small change, but just little and often. Really, it just helps to keep this kind of work supported. Believe it or not, there's quite a lot of work goes. I know it doesn't look like it. Quite a lot of work goes into putting these things together, and so it's always helpful if people are helping me out. So thanks very much. If you are watching on YouTube, and if you're not, then please like, subscribe, do all the things you're supposed to do on social media. Leave any comments that you've got down into the comment box. I get to every comment and I respond to all of them, and sometimes I'm even nice. So there we go. Thanks very much for joining me. I look forward very much to seeing you again the next time on Not a Collection of Parts. Bye for now.